Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. The aptly named 7th episode of Ben 10, Kevin 11, introduces us to a character pretty familiar to fans, namely Kevin Levin, another kid with a weird numerical last name and a bad attitude to boot. What? Couldn't you tell by his padlock necklace? Seriously, who wears a padlock as a necklace? I know why he does, even if it's not mentioned in this episode, but still. If there's one thing this episode made me realize, it's my age. As a kid, you tend to identify with and root for the child characters, but now that I'm an adult, I spend this episode very much on Grandpa Max's side. And who can blame me? Ben has acted childish in the previous episodes, but he crosses a line in this episode, which rightfully leads to him losing his grandpa's trust by episode's end. I think this needed to happen at this point to help teach Ben a lesson in what being a hero is all about, as well as guide him to the man we all know he'll become. Of course, at the same time, he's still a 10-year-old, so it'll take this lesson being hammered into him multiple times before it truly sticks. I would know. I have a niece, and my god, do I have to repeat myself a billion times to her. Does she learn her lesson? Yes, but only for that day. Then, by tomorrow, she'll have forgotten it. In episode 2, I mentioned how Dr. Anima was the other side of the coin for Ben, but Kevin truly is the other side of the coin for Ben. Kevin is what would happen to Ben if he only cared about himself and used his powers for selfish reasons. Essentially, you could think of Kevin as the Dr. Octopus to Ben's Spider-Man. He has no support system, like Ben does, and he has powers that make others think of him as a freak. Kevin is the perfect antithesis for Ben. After getting used to how the sequels portrayed his powers, it's interesting to go back to a more energy vampire version of his powers. Most of the episode has him utilizing them in not so visually exciting ways, but once he throws down with Ben, we get to see some really stellar looking action scenes. And Kevin just looks so screwed up and is awesome. Seeing him half normal and half heat blast is great. And we can clearly see him slowly mastering the energy because when he absorbs Ben as forearms, he has a slightly more complete transformation. I think this episode had a lot of great moments, including Ben and Kevin teaming up and running amok in the city, and setting up Kevin to be an incredibly new recurring enemy for Ben to face in later episodes. I think the only moment that had me confused was the extreme response from the police. I mean, they sent in the SWAT team to stop two kids from stealing some video games, and they even shot at them. And that was before they used their powers. Not sure if it's meant to be an extreme response or if the writers just sort of goofed because they just really wanted to have Ben fly through the city while being shot at while carrying Kevin. And those were my thoughts on episode 7. What did you think of this episode, or what was your favorite moment? Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. The 6th episode of Ben 10, Tourist Trap, has a lot to offer, from a prankster villain to good old-fashioned science. The episode has Ben and family heading to Sparksville, which seems to be the most boring tourist trap imaginable. I mean, they have a huge introduction for the world's largest ball of rubber bands. Of course, you'd think Ben would have learned by now that what seems boring at first often hides something sinister below the surface. Although in this case, it's less sinister and more extreme pranks from the town's resident alien trickster, Megawatt. I'm not entirely positive how it got trapped, but when Ben and Gwen release it, the episode really gets fun. This episode seemed like a throwback to the early days of animation with another dangerous trickster, the Gremlin, who would often mess with planes. In this instance, the Gremlin is an electrical alien that looks more like a battery than anything else, but the concept remains the same. Since the enemy this time around is not as physically intimidating as previous foes until Act 3's giant planetarium fight, a lot of the episode is focused on trying to contain Megawatt or survive his idea of practical jokes, which is honestly a nice change of pace with all the previous episodes involving fisticuffs. And as comical as this little alien gremlin was, the real comedy delight of this episode had to be the mayor of Sparksville, Earl, with his incredibly deadpan reaction to everything around him.
Is it just me, or is there a lot of excitement today?
Another difference this episode has on the others is Gwen's involvement in not only freeing the villain, but also helping out quite a bit more than before. To be fair, her first idea releases dozens of megawatts, but her heart was in the right place. That has to count for something, right? No? Okay, well, I tried. As I said, there was quite a bit of science in this episode, from trapping the megawatts underground using a thermometer, or sealing them in a non-conductive prison like a giant fishbowl. In an age where a lot of what happens in cartoons relies heavily on cartoon logic, it's nice to look back and find some real science being used. Or, at worst, pseudoscience. In conclusion, this to me was a great episode full of fun comedy moments and some inventive, out-of-the-box thinking on the part of our protagonist. And who doesn't love to see their favorite characters acting intelligently? Those were my thoughts on this episode. Now let me hear yours in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Take care.